Hi, class. I'm here to discuss with you for a moment Paradise Lost by John Milton. And my guess is that you might be struggling with this book one chapter that we're reading, and that it might be a bit difficult for you to navigate with all the allusions and all of the language challenges. So, the purpose of my video here for you today is to open this up for you a bit, Paradise Lost, and have you think about it in a little bit different terms, perhaps than you already are, and to reinforce the idea of close reading. So let's get started. Think of this book that we're reading from this 12-book epic poem that was published first in 1667 and then again in 1674 revised. Think of it the way you think of Marvel Comic Universe films, like Captain America or Black Panther or Spider-Man, Avenger, any of them, and you have a sense of how cinematic Paradise Lost is. In the center of the epic is Satan, an angel who has been forced out of heaven by God because he attempted to usurp God's power. In book one of John Milton's 12-book epic, Satan has fallen into a lake of fire with many other former angels. The epic begins with him and his fellows waking up and realizing what has happened to them. It continues with the fallen angels making and executing a plan to get revenge on God for having tossed them out of heaven. So that's the overview. And let's think about what an epic is. So, in one source that I have, the New Princeton Book of Poetic Terms, it defines an epic as follows, quote, "An epic is a long narrative poem that treats a single heroic figure or a group of such figures and concerns an historical event, such as a war or conquest, or an heroic quest, or some other significant, mythic, or legendary achievement that is central to the traditions and beliefs of its culture. Epic usually develops in the oral culture of a society at a period when the nation is taking stock of its historical, cultural, and religious heritage. Epic often focuses on a hero, sometimes semi-divine, who performs difficult and virtuous deeds. It frequently involves the interaction between human beings and gods. The events of the poem, however, affect the lives of ordinary human beings and often change the course of the nation. This is very true about Paradise Lost, in that the historical moment in terms of what John Milton was living through, and he lived from 1608 to 1674, is they are grappling with the idea of monarchy. What is a monarch? And should a monarch have power over the society, or should it be more a democracy? This is kind of at the center of what's happening in John Milton's time. And at the same time, there is a sense of warfare, as this definition is stating. So there's a civil war that happens in England at this time. And it's partly about monarchy, but it's also partly about religion, as this definition is underscoring as well. And the religious question has to do with Puritanism. So England wanted some faction of English Christians, and this was under the English Anglican religion. Some of those Christians wanted to separate themselves from anything having to do with Catholicism, which was called the Reformation, and to go back to a purer Puritan understanding of Christian teachings. So that's happening at the same time as the idea of what is a monarchy. So that's in the background. What is an epic? This concerns us greatly in this poem. There are they're typically long, typically elaborate in narrative design, and they're episodic in sequence. So that sounds like a play, or it sounds like a film too, right? Episodic sequencing, and their epics are elevated in language. So the language is not the language of normal everyday speech. The epic, here are 8 characteristics. The epic usually begins in the middle of things, in the midst of things. It's called in medias res. So it starts in the middle of everything, just like all these Marvel movies start in the middle of things, in media res. 2, it often opens with a formal invocation of a muse or some other divine figure. 3, epics often employ elaborate figures, such as extended similes, comparing two unlike things for an extended period of time. And that's called an epic or a Homeric simile. Epics, number 4, includes a catalog of warriors, detailed descriptions of arms and armor, and descriptions of sacrifices and other rituals. 5, includes formal combat between warriors, prefaced by an exchange of boasts. Epics, number 6, incorporates within it not only the methods of narrative poetry, but also of lyric and dramatic poetry too. 7, it includes and expands upon this idea of lamentation, lament. Number 8, with its extended speeches and its well-crafted scene structure, it is often dramatic and may be the ancestor of ancient drama. So Paradise Lost is an example of such a narrative epic poem, but so is the Divine Comedy by Dante, the Aeneid by Virgil, the Iliad and the Odyssey by Homer, the Faerie Queene by Edmund Spenser, and Childe Harold's Pilgrimage by George Gordon, Lord Byron. So let's talk about specifics of Paradise Lost. It begins in media res. After we have this argument, which summarizes the events and is found at the beginning of each of the 12 books of Paradise Lost, we find the formal invocation to the muse. That formal invocation is, quote, "Sing, heavenly muse, that on the secret top of Oreb, or of Sinai, didst inspire that shepherd, Moses, who first taught the chosen seed, the chosen people, in the beginning how the heavens and earth rose out of chaos." Okay, so sing, heavenly muse. So there's the invocation to the muse. This is followed by lines that indicate we're in the middle of the action, the way many Marvel Cinematic Universe films begin. Quote, "For now the thought, both of lost happiness and lasting pain, torments him," Satan, "found he throws his baleful eyes that witnessed huge affliction and dismay, and he views the dismal situation waste and wild." He is coming to after having fallen for how many days? The equivalent of 9 days and nights from heaven. He's been kicked out of heaven by God, lands in the lake of fire along with all the other fallen angels, and suddenly comes to and realizes, we're not in heaven anymore. What happened? This is beginning in the middle, in media res. We soon find long speeches, so these speeches that were alluded to, first by Satan, starting at line 84 in this book, then by another fallen angel, Beelzebub, and that his speech starts at line 128. And we are in the middle of things when the poem's narrator speaks between, and the two of them go back and forth, and Satan gives Beelzebub a pep talk. All is not lost, Satan says. The unconquerable will and study of revenge, immortal hate, and courage never to submit or yield, and what is else not to be overcome. That's at line 106 to 109. So, all is not lost. We must have courage. We will either submit, and in this case, the enemy or the foe is God. So we'll submit to God, or we will fight. And we are powerful too. We're angels. So let's fight. So that's the pep talk that Satan's giving Beelzebub. And at 159, Satan tells Beelzebub to do aught good never will be our task, but ever to do ill our sole delight. To do anything good will never be our task, but always will do ill, and that will be our sole delight, our sole pleasure. So we're here to do evil, not good. So we're here to fight God. And this is the subject of Paradise Lost. The battle between God and Satan, or good and evil. Then he starts out with his plan at 180. Seest thou yon dreary plain over there, forlorn, empty, and wild? Thither let us tend. Let's go there. There let us go, right? From off the tossing of these fiery waves. There rest. And reassembling our afflicted powers, consult how we may henceforth most offend our enemy, our own loss, how repair. So, and who is it, that enemy again? That's God, who has tossed Satan and his brood out of heaven. Satan spins his and his fellows' fall in a positive way. Quote at line 254, the mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven. The mind is its own place. It's our perception, how we observe something. This is either hell or heaven. And I perceive it as one or the other. And Satan is perceiving the hell that he has fallen into as a heaven of sorts, because he can make his own choices there, have his own power there, not follow the will of God. Here at least, he says, we shall be free. Here we may reign secure, and in my choice, to reign is worth ambition, though in hell. Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. That's Satan's perspective. Beelzebub then suggests that Satan speak to the other fallen angels and give them strength, which Satan does. This is followed by an epic cataloging of the warriors, in this case, fallen angels, and Satan calls out to them that their goal should be to repossess heaven. And then the underworld in which they find themselves seems to respond. The world itself seems to respond. And all of a sudden, a great palace materializes. And this palace is called Pandemonium. And then Satan and the other fallen angels go off to meet in Pandemonium, where they will have a council and decide how to seek their revenge against God. End of book 1. So, let's look at a couple of passages that are most cinematic. Okay? So, on line 221, first of all, let's look at that one. We begin with forthright, forthwith, Upright, he, Satan, rears from off the pool his mighty stature. On each hand, the flames driven backward slope their pointing spires, and rolled in billows leave in the midst a horrid vale, horrid valley. Then with expanded wings he steers his flight aloft, incumbent on the dusky air that felt unusual weight, till on dry unusual weight because he's so large. It's like a huge tower. Till on dry land he lights, he lands, as if it were land that ever burned with solid, as the lake with liquid fire. So the land's on fire too. As such appeared in hue, as when the force of subterranean wind transports a hill torn from Pelorus, or the shattered side of thundering Etna, whose combustible and feward entrails, thence conceiving fire, sublimed with mineral fury, aids the wind, and leave in a singed bottom all involved with stench and smoke. And next follows his mate, Beelzebub. So let's remind ourselves, the narrative is only part of the reason we're reading this. The other part is the language itself, the living, breathing, rich language that Milton is using, and how to allow that to have our concentration. On 283, we get some more cinema, and that is he scarce had ceased. Okay, and this is the first time we really clearly see Satan. He scarcely had ceased when the superior fiend, so he, Beelzebub, has just spoken, scarcely had ceased when the superior fiend was moving toward the shore, his ponderous shield, ethereal temper, massy, large, and round, behind him cast. So he's got a shield behind him. The broad circumference hung on his shoulders like the moon, whose orb through optic glass the Tuscan artist views at evening from the top of Fessoli, or in Valdarno to descry new lands. Satan, this huge, huge, scary figure, right? And another one at 663. He spake, and to confirm his words, out flew millions of flaming swords, drawn from the thighs of mighty cherubim, angels. The sudden blaze far round illumined hell. Highly they raged against the highest, and fierce with grasped arms clashed on their sounding shields the din of war, hurling defiance toward the vault of heaven. The language is just so muscular and loud, right? There's visual elements. The millions of flaming swords, for instance, is visual. And then there's auditory imagery too. Fierce grasp arms clashed on their sounding shields, the din, the loud sound of war, hurling defiance toward the vault of heaven, hurling defiance, their rage, their anger at having been tossed out of heaven. And these are some really intense lines that are going on here. So to pay attention to the lines and to listen to them as well as read them is what we're really all about here. I think I'll leave it at that. Thanks for listening.